All right, good morning, everyone. It is 11, so we are going to be prompt and get ourselves started on time today. Thank you so much for joining us for Philanthropic Tax Strategies, creating a win-win for clients and causes. I'm Andrea Scott. I'm the Director of Gift Planning for the Community Foundation. And I have been in the nonprofit development industry for 24 years now, working in public and private universities, national and local nonprofits, as well as community foundations. And I always say it's the best job in the world, helping people do good. So, and helping people give away money is a lot of fun. So we will be looking at some different things throughout the day, including some case studies and such. But before we get started, let's go through a little bit of housekeeping. Let's see, next slide. There we go. I'm going to introduce you real quick to Miriam Lill. She's our operations officer. She's going to be on this morning to monitor chat, kind of keep an eye out for Q&As, for raised hands during our Q&A session. Today we'll be spending about 45 minutes going through the presentation, so we'll have plenty of time at the end for some questions. So feel free to drop questions into the chat box or raise your virtual hand at the end of the session. And we'll be able to get to those questions for you. So a quick look at our agenda today. This will be pretty fast paced, so keeping it interesting for you, hopefully. Real quick, I want to share a little bit about the Community Foundation. There are over 800 community foundations in the United States. We all operate as independent 501c3s. We have a unique role of growing permanent resources to meet the needs of our community. The Community Foundation of the North State, we hold over $33 million in assets, and we administer several grant cycles and hundreds of scholarship applications annually, distributing over $6 million in awards each year. And also many of you know us through North State Giving Tuesday, which Miriam takes the charge of, which raises over $1 million for our local nonprofits. Here are a few little facts about us, but I wanted just to highlight one of my favorite facts on here is number 4. Since the year 2000, since we were founded, we've awarded over $48 million to area nonprofits. And it's really exciting to think about how much more will be awarded over the next 20 years. Now, gift planning, what is this term? Most of us know planned giving. That's kind of the term that's been around longest. Gift planning, here's a quick definition for you. It used to be called gift planning, which was largely seen as planning for gifts to be made at the donor's death. That sort of shifted in the last several years to include planning and making complex gifts during a donor's lifetime as well. Usually donors come to us because, of course, they want to give back. They're charitably minded. So they want to set up a fund or include a gift in their estate plans. But sometimes the conversations come about for tax and financial reasons as well. And there are great solutions that solve those issues while also creating a philanthropic outcome. And that's really the win-win that we're aiming for. So what types of assets are we dealing with? Really, if you can name it, we're probably dealing with it. And that's the unique thing about community foundations as well, is that we're set up to really accept a wide variety of assets. Nonprofits typically see cash as king, but rarely is cash the best or most tax-wise asset for a donor to give. So we can deal with a variety of assets that really maximize the tax benefit and create the best gift structure for donors. And we can also help process complex gifts for local nonprofits that may not have the capacity to accept those types of gifts. Now, our fund options, we are a collection of funds. All community foundations exist as a collection of funds. And here are some of our fund options, some of our most popular. Donor advised funds, of course, which most of us are familiar with. Scholarship funds, which you may not know that we actually administer several hundred scholarship awards that we give out each year. Designated funds, which means that they are set up specifically to benefit a named nonprofit. And field of interest funds, which are exactly what they sound like. They benefit a field of interest like youth, arts, environment. And then charitable trusts, which I'm going to share a little bit more about in the next slide. We also offer or will be offering charitable gift annuities, which if you're familiar with commercial annuities, they work much the same, except they just have some different tax advantages. You'll see that there's a little asterisk next to 5 of the funds that I've named, and that's because we offer a donor recommended investment management policy related to those funds, which means that if you have clients interested in those types of funds, they can make that gift to us while you as an investment manager continue to manage those assets. And in some cases that can actually increase or gain additional AUM because clients can donate illiquid assets that we then sell and invest, which could be part of a DRIM policy. So I'm happy to talk more about those details offline if you're interested. So charitable trusts, like I mentioned, this is one of the fund types that we offer. And they're a bit of a best kept secret for those of you who aren't familiar with them. In the gift planning world, they are the Swiss Army knife of gift vehicles because they can really do so much. They've been around for a really long time, since the 1969 Tax Act. There's 2 main types of charitable trusts, and of course, a variety underneath those 2 main types. But really the charitable remainder trust and charitable lead trust are the most common. And how it works is they're designed to accept a wide variety of assets, which are then invested to create income for the donor or for a designated beneficiary, and then ultimately to benefit charity. And typically these sorts of trusts, they're set up with a minimum term of 10 years, all the way up to multiple lifetimes. And the IRS requires a minimum payout rate of 5%, as well as a minimum 10% remainder present value remainder rather, to the charity. They provide significant tax deductions and tax savings, and they're really growing in popularity. In fact, we all know the popularity of donor advised funds. They've really exploded over the past several decades and gained a lot of popularity and maybe a little bit of notoriety that we've seen with some of the governance around them. The latest figures are that $234 billion in assets are held by donor advised funds. But charitable trusts are also holding significant assets as well. The last time that Giving USA did a calculation based on the IRS statistics of income data, they came up with $115 billion being held in charitable trust assets. And I think that these numbers are really only going to get larger because, of course, we've all heard what's coming. There are 75 million baby boomers expected to retire by 2030. There's $68 trillion in wealth transfer anticipated. And of course, we've all heard these numbers. But what's interesting is to think of how these assets are going to be transferred, especially if they trigger major taxable events in the process. And when you consider the fact that baby boomer wealth is largely held in business interest, real estate, and retirement funds, then you are certainly talking about taxable assets. This is a really interesting visual that I saw that I wanted to share with you all because I thought it was such a great snapshot of assets held as in terms of a distribution by net worth. And you can see on the screen outside of primary residence, especially when you look at that $1 million band across the middle there, that you're looking at IRA holdings, business interests, and real estate outside of a primary residence. And so 60% of small business owners, in fact, are baby boomers. And according to the Exit Planning Institute, nearly 80% of those business owners do not have a transition plan. And then for real estate holdings, the average landlord owns 2 rental properties. And according to the Pew Research Center, they're reporting over $350 billion in rental income. And that's just for individuals who hold properties. So when you're dealing with those type of assets, you're certainly looking at potential significant tax issues, which is where opportunity really lies. So solutions for some of these complex problems, we're going to dive into today the first 4 bullet points that you see there with some case studies and more information. But I wanted to give a little bit of a highlight on the others that are listed there. Starting with ranch and farmland. It's really important to note that ranch and farmland have more complexities involved than traditional real estate assets. So while they make fantastic gifts and can be structured really well, especially for charitable trusts, they just have to be handled a little bit more carefully to make sure you're following all the rules. In fact, there was a PLR just as last year involving a crop donation into a charitable trust that wasn't correctly handled, and it ended up earning the donors a notice of deficiency, which nobody ever wants to see. In terms of retirement income and diversification, charitable gift annuities are really popular for this, and they're growing in popularity because we're in a high interest rate environment right now, which means that the payout rates for charitable gift annuities are also going up. They're similar to traditional annuities, but there are major tax advantages that are involved in them, including a significant tax deduction and a portion of tax-free payments, which is why it makes it really appealing for donors who are interested in those. Divorce settlement alimony payments. This is an interesting one because since the rules changed about tax treatments of alimony payments in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we've seen some creative cases that have popped up using charitable remainder trusts that set up the payment to the former spouse through the CRT, then have a term of years to the donor themselves, with the remainder going to charity at the end. So interesting to see some solutions popping up for this in different settlement cases. And then for estates in excess of the exclusion, whether or not we see the change with the 2025 sunset become reality, for clients who are in that danger zone, there are some really great options using charitable lead trusts, which are particularly useful for saving estate and gift taxes. But the bottom line is, pick any of these complex problems and we can probably provide you with a gift model or several gift models to compare different options to find out what might work best for your client. These are complimentary, happy to provide them for you. And that gives you some ways to discuss those options with your clients and see if they might want to set up one of these structured gifts. So real quick, Miriam, I'm going to pause and see if we have any questions popping up in the chat.
Thanks, Andrea. We do have one question. Our friend Mark Fleur up in Mount Shasta. He was curious, do you have information about what a CRT client looks like in terms of their assets, income, or demographics? What makes a great CRT client?
You know, that's a great question, Mark. And I will say that because CRTs being that Swiss Army knife of charitable gift vehicles, I've really seen a wide variety of donors use them. Typically, and you'll see a couple examples coming up that maybe gives you a better idea, but typically we see those clients that are in their 60s or 70s, they're sitting on highly appreciated assets. So they're dealing with a major capital gains issue potentially in that. And they're wanting to create a form of income. So that seems to be the type of client that this sort of trusts work best for. But like I said, they're such a Swiss Army knife that you can make them work for almost any type of client. Although I will say that charitable trusts, typically the minimum value to establish them is $100,000. Because for anything less than that, it's really not going to have the greatest benefit to the donor or ultimately to the charity to keep those rules that the IRS requires. But thanks for that question. Anything else before we move on?
That's it for now.
Awesome. All right, I'll take us to the next screen. Now we're gonna dive in and we're gonna take a look at a business sale gift model that involves using a charitable trust as the solution. So here we go with a business exit strategy. In this example, the client is married, age 65, and majority owner of shares of an LLC. You will see that little asterisk is there. The asterisk is to remind that there are some rules that apply to CRTs. CRTs cannot hold S Corp, which many LLCs are structured with S Corp. CRTs are simply not allowed to hold them. So that's not part of the structure that's allowed. If you have clients with S Corp, there may be other structures that would work for them instead. So certainly still talk to us about those situations if we can be of help. Generally speaking, any business exit requires careful planning and rules to follow when you're dealing with setting up a charitable trust. The particular goal here for these donors was retirement income. They obviously were sitting on significant capital gains because you can see they have $1 million appraisal of shares with no basis. And they're looking to avoid that along with avoiding some net investment income tax. They wanted to also create a significant tax deduction to help with other situations that they were dealing with in sales. To offset some of those other taxes they had, and to fund life insurance for their heirs. This was a really creative strategy that they put in place for this. And the big bonus for them was that ultimately this fund would create a legacy donor advised fund for their adult children to manage. And they really were pleased about that idea of kind of this family philanthropy being established through this. Now the performance projections here, and I will say this, these are just projections. Of course, that's the trick with some of these is clients are really looking at what will happen, and with a sale of the business without the trust, they can guarantee we will sell it, we will pay the taxes, and we will walk away with this amount of money. For projections around a CRT, you're dealing over a much longer period of time. You'll see all the performance projection variables that are written there at the bottom for you to understand how these calculations were made. So first of all, with the sale of the CRT, it's a tax-free sale because CRTs do not pay taxes. So that $1 million funds into the charitable remainder trust in this case, the lifetime income based on the life expectancy of the donors, puts them at nearly $1.7 million in income. And I looked at, for this particular one, it was a unit trust, so variable payments were selected over a 6% payout rate, and the average payment was over $60,000 a year to the donors. They used a portion of that CRT income to then fund life insurance to give as an inheritance to their children. And that was really important to these donors, that they had some way to, that $1 million business that they were now giving to charity, they wanted to replace that asset as a way to gift to their heirs. And so this was the solution for that in this instance. And then ultimately, because over the span of the many years of this charitable trust, the projected end to charity was $1.25 million. which was really thrilling to them. So that was going to the donor advised fund that would ultimately be funded at the end of this trust and then managed by their children. So it's a great way for them to create that philanthropic legacy they were looking for. And then of course you look at the tax savings. That's a pretty nice number. And that includes not the full charitable tax deduction, because I always look at what's the AGI, what can they actually use. So this is the usable portion of that charitable tax deduction that was created here, as well as the capital gains that were avoided along the way. So it's a really a nice total benefit of the sale in this instance. I want to take a minute to stop again in case there's anything in the chat. I know this was a lot of numbers to look at, but we'll be looking next at a rental real estate example too.
Nothing yet, Andrea. We might give them
No
a
problem.
second just in case, but
we'll continue on. So we've got another example to look at using rental real estate property. And again, knowing that we have so many baby boomers that are holding rental real estate, averaging 2 properties per landlord. This is an example of that type of client, married, age 70. And frankly, this is a textbook candidate for a charitable remainder trust because they are sitting on a highly appreciated asset that's also been highly depreciated over the years of the rental. And they are just tired of dealing with the upkeep and the expenses, especially any landlord that lived through COVID and the moratorium. It was just such a headache, and they simply want to get out of the business of being landlords. They just feel like as an asset, it's simply underperforming for them. So the appraisal on the property is $500,000. We're sitting on a basis of $100,000. So the goal here for the clients was to eliminate the hassle of managing it, increase their income, avoid capital gains, and create an income tax deduction. And then the big bonus, which was so meaningful to them in creating the gift model, is that they ended up funding or being able to fund a really nice scholarship to benefit Shasta High School students. So the performance projections, again, here, you see the sale with no trust. Sale of the property, less their taxes and fees involved in that sale. Those are real estate fees. The difference being using the trust. The sale of the property has no seller's agent commission because the community foundation doesn't take a seller's agent commission for it. So the sale goes into the trust. That then creates lifetime income. This particular model is showing what an annuity trust rate would provide for them. They wanted a fixed payment. They wanted to know that they would get exactly $30,000 a year for their life expectancy, which is in this term, this was expected to be until age 90. But of course, because it's a fixed guaranteed payout, it's $30,000 a year for the rest of their lives. So that income projection of $600,000, a charitable projection of $650,000. And again, this is all based on those investment returns over time. And then ultimately, also the tax savings that this provided for them, really being the value that they were looking for overall in terms of providing more income and less hassle. And I will say this, for any gift models that we can provide, I will always show what a charitable unit trust looks like, as well as a charitable annuity trust. So you can see what those different models would project and different payout rates. It could be a 5% payout, a 6% payout, even a 7% payout. So depending on the asset and the needs of the client, we can look at all sorts of different ways to model that gift. Some additional options when thinking about rental real estate. An undivided interest sale in the CRT. So undivided interest simply means that 2 or more interested parties in one property are held under the same title. And what happens is that this is a great option for when a client wants a partial payout for the asset and a sale into the CRT, which would then be used to invest and provide income over time and that tax deduction. So 50-50 is something we could commonly see with an undivided interest sale. And so again, that also helps offset the capital gains for their portion because they have the tax deduction to use. And then we also see this using multiple properties over time for those who do have multiple properties and want to stagger their exit over a course of time or a course of years. They can set up a charitable trust and donate their properties to that over time, which then staggers their income tax deduction as well as the growth in their income over time. And then the payout terms. So charitable trusts, again, the Swiss Army knife, they can be set up to have multiple beneficiary terms, which could be an example of 10 years to their heirs and a lifetime after that term, a lifetime to the donors, or flip that. It could be the lifetime of the donors and then at their death, 10 years to their heirs, and then at that end of term, then the remainder kicks in for charity. So all of those terms are possible in a wide variety of setups. So IRAs have gotten tricky because of what we're seeing with the problematic 10-year rules around what used to be the stretch IRA. So we're seeing some solutions coming up, obviously, with RMDs being allowed to use an RMD for a qualified charitable distribution of up to $100,000 a year per donor. That's helping donors who need to avoid the income tax during their lifetime, which is great. And as you can see, we're holding $11 trillion in IRAs. So this is a very real problem and opportunity. So with the lifetime distributions like that, for those donors who are looking to make a qualified charitable distribution, the way that we can help in those situations there's some options. They can certainly use that qualified charitable distribution to create a fund at the community foundation. It can be a scholarship fund or a field of interest. The only exclusion required by the IRS is that they cannot use that qualified charitable distribution to create a donor advised fund. That's a no-no. But they can also send that single distribution to the community foundation and then have us do the distribution to any number of charities that they choose from there. We actually just had a donor who sent us $11,000 from their RMD as a qualified charitable distribution. And then he had a list of 7 charities that he wanted it to then go out to. So it just helps simplify things for the donor as well as for the IRA custodian to send the one check and we handle distributions from there. So that one check creates many gifts. And then for testamentary IRAs, so we're seeing that there's this growing trend and popularity of testamentary IRAs to replace the stretch IRA. And that's to fund a charitable remainder trust using the IRA. So the IRA names the charitable trust as the beneficiary, and then the charitable trust, which kicks in at the death of the donor, creates payments to a designated beneficiary from there. So for instance, if it was to their adult child at that point, that allows those payments to be stretched out over the lifetime of the heir versus dealing with this 10-year rule that many designations are now stuck with. So we're seeing that really grow in popularity as a solution. And then we've also seen for those who simply have other assets, especially tax-free assets that they can gift to their children, they're looking at gifting their IRA to charity instead of dealing with the tax issues, and they can make that IRA distribution to the community foundation to benefit multiple charities or causes, and we'll manage that for them on our end. So that's another great option for handling IRAs. I do want to mention that both of those testamentary options can also be included on our donor recommended investment management policy. So if a donor creates a CRT using their IRA, as a testamentary structure that can continue being managed by their investment manager. And same thing with IRA funding to multiple charities or causes. If they create a fund here at the Community Foundation as a testament with using their testamentary IRA, then that can continue being managed by their investment manager as well, if they designate that. Real quickly, I want to touch on some wealth replacement and asset protection strategies that I've seen for heirs. We've, in addition to, of course, the inherited IRA solutions, here are some other ways that we can kind of get the heirs in the mix. So charitable trusts. Of course, the designated beneficiary can be anyone, not just the donor. So the donor can establish it and name their designated beneficiary as their heirs. So the examples that I gave with the business and rental sale, you can just replace that lifetime income to the donor as lifetime income to the heir, or it can even be a term of years. But sometimes the inherited asset that itself becomes problematic to the heir because although they're valuable, they may see them as unusable or even unwanted. In those instances, we're seeing the heirs setting up that charitable trust so that they can turn that asset into income. And then with protecting the asset, I have a really excellent example of an asset transfer using a charitable lead trust that I thought was so creatively used. So this was inherited farmland worth about $2.5 million that the owners wanted to then pass on to their adult children during their lifetime. This particular couple was in that sort of danger zone around estate and gift taxes. So they knew that was going to hit them. And they were trying to structure as much as they could in their lifetime to protect this transfer. So in this case, the land was in a long-term lease that was paying $150,000 a year. They set up a charitable lead trust, and the lease income, because trusts don't pay investment income tax, the lease on the farmland is considered investment income. That $150,000 a year then is being used as investment income. The lead trust kicks in, so that $150,000 was given to charity for the first 10 years of the trust. When that term ended, which was also in sync with the ending of the lease, the heirs were then transferred the property. So the farmland stayed intact, the farmland transferred, and over that 10-year period, the growth of the asset was tremendous. I think the projected growth on it was something around $10 million in value. So they ended up getting tax-free growth on the asset, transferring the property to their heirs, making a significant gift to charity, and saving major gift and estate taxes in the process. So it was such a creative win-win situation in using a charitable lead trust to protect the asset. We've also, as I shared before, seen the purchase of life insurance using CRT income. But what some people don't know is you can actually have the CRT itself hold life insurance. So that's another strategy that can work well for certain situations. So I'm going to check in one more time with Miriam before we go on to the next slide.
You're good to go.
Awesome. Hopefully that just means you all are saving a lot of great questions and comments for a discussion at the end. We're speaking of being at the end. I just have a couple more things to share with you. Just wanted to reiterate, we are here to act as a sounding board and a resource for you and your clients. We can offer complementary gift models that are fully customizable depending on the asset, the basis, the tax structure, the payout. So feel free to ask for those anytime. Happy to run those for you. We also provide sample bequest language if you have clients that are looking to make charitable bequests. And what we really offer as a service is simplifying those distributions by, if they name the community foundation in their request, then they can work directly with us to create the instructions, which they can change anytime with us, about how those distributions will be made. So they can have one designation in their will or their trust that then creates instructions with us directly on how those distributions will be used for charity. So again, looking to simplify things for you and your clients and be a solution. And speaking of solutions, we hope that you have been receiving our advisor solutions. It's a new e-news publication that we started this last fall. We will only be emailing you occasionally with different strategies and tools and insights that we want to share. There are kind of things in the news and things that we're doing here. So please subscribe to Advisor Solutions. If you're on this webinar, you're probably already subscribed to it and you may not even know it. So check your spam folder just in case. We have been sharing our news and events there. And speaking of events, we have a special event coming up in April. We're hosting a professional advisor luncheon featuring Professor Sam Donaldson, who is an absolute expert in estate planning and taxation. He has a wealth of knowledge, and he's actually he's got such a great sense of humor, and he's really enjoyable to watch. So he's a wonderful speaker that we see on a national level at conferences and presentations for professional advisors. So that will be coming up Thursday, April 27th. Hosted at the Sheraton here in Reading. So we look forward to having you there, and you'll be receiving more information about that in March. So put it on the calendar and save the date for that event. All right, as promised, I came just over 45 minutes, but here we are, the end of our presentation, and I want to open it up for any questions in the meantime. I do want to also remind you that this is being recorded, so we will have the recording and the slide deck sent out so that you have a chance to look through this or even share this with clients if you would like, and colleagues as well. Please use the chat box and let's get to some questions.
All right, Andrea, do you have the chat box open, or would you like me to dictate for you?
Let's see. Let me see if my technology wants to work with me and allow for it. All right, I've got it open. Okay. Oh, great question. So this is a question about our fee schedule. If the client's assets are being managed by the investment manager, how does the community foundation get paid? So the community foundation fee schedule, all of our funds have a fee, and that's what's charged to the fund. And our fees range from 1% to 3%, depending on the type of fund and management of the fund. For charitable remainder trusts in particular, the trust pays for its own the expenses of the trust. There's no let's see, the question being, are you invoicing it, or are they direct distributions to the foundation? If they're being managed by the investment manager, then yes, it would be a feed invoice on a quarterly basis. So that annual fee would just then be split up into that quarter. All right. Any other questions? I hope I answered that. I'm happy to share more about our what we call our DRIM policy. I have a flyer on that I can certainly share with you if you are interested. Any other questions? Oh, I see one more pop up. I appreciate the kind comment, Max. we will be sharing the slide deck. We'll share the recording when it's ready and send it out to you all along with the save the date for our April event. Look forward to seeing you there. And we'll keep working on some more options and opportunities for us to connect with the advisors and provide more information for you in the future. So thanks again for being with us today. Enjoy your gorgeous Wednesday with this spring-like weather, and we will see you all again soon. Thank you so much.